Welcome to this educational journey through one of antiquity's most remarkable episodes. Before we begin exploring the Third Servile War, if you're passionate about history and want to continue learning about the events that shaped our world, consider subscribing to this channel, giving this video a like, and activating the notification bell. This way, you'll never miss our upcoming historical content. Now, let us travel back more than 2,000 years to ancient Rome. The context of an empire built on slavery. In the year 73 BCE, the Roman Republic stood as the dominant power across the Mediterranean world. Its legions had conquered vast territories stretching from Spain to Asia Minor, from northern Africa to the shores of Gaul. Yet beneath the magnificent temples, the bustling forums, and the grand villas of the wealthy elite, there existed a foundation of human misery that sustained this mighty civilization: slavery. The Roman economy was fundamentally dependent upon enslaved labor. Historians estimate that during the late Republic, as many as 1 in 3 individuals living on the Italian peninsula was a slave. This represented perhaps 1.5 million human beings out of a total population of approximately 5 million. These men, women, and children came from every corner of the known world, captured in Rome's endless wars of conquest, or purchased from merchants who trafficked in human cargo. The conditions of slavery in the Roman world varied dramatically depending upon one's circumstances. House slaves might receive relatively decent treatment, perhaps even education and the possibility of eventual freedom through manumission. But for the vast majority who labored in the agricultural estates, the mines, or the gladiatorial schools, existence was a brutal exercise in survival. Roman law classified slaves not as persons, but as property, granting owners absolute authority over their human chattel, including the right to inflict punishment, injury, or death without legal consequence. The philosopher Seneca the Younger, writing in the 1st century CE, described the conditions faced by household slaves in vivid terms. He wrote of slaves forced to stand in silence through entire nights while their masters feasted, forbidden even to cough or sneeze without risking punishment by the lash. And these were the fortunate ones. Those who worked the vast agricultural estates of southern Italy and Sicily endured conditions far worse, chained together in work gangs, sleeping in underground barracks called ergastula, worked quite literally to death. It was in this context that the largest and most successful slave revolt in Roman history would erupt, led by a Thracian gladiator named Spartacus. The Third Servile War, as it came to be known, would shake the foundations of Roman society, humble its legendary legions, and leave a legacy that continues to resonate across the millennia to our present day.
The origins of Spartacus and the world of gladiators. To understand the War of Spartacus, we must first understand the man who would become its leader and the brutal world from which he emerged. Spartacus was born in Thrace, a region encompassing parts of what is now Bulgaria, northern Greece, and Turkey. The Thracians were a warlike people whom both Greeks and Romans considered barbaric. Yet the ancient historian Plutarch notably described Spartacus as being more Greek than Thracian, possessed of exceptional intelligence and a cultured mind that belied his origins. The details of Spartacus's early life remain shrouded in mystery. The ancient sources provide conflicting accounts of how he came to be enslaved. According to Appian, the Greek historian who wrote approximately 150 years after these events, Spartacus had once fought against the Romans and was taken prisoner before being sold into slavery. The Roman historian Florus suggests he was a Roman auxiliary soldier, a non-citizen who served in the legions, who was later imprisoned for desertion and robbery. What seems certain is that his military background and impressive physique made him an ideal candidate for the gladiatorial arena. The gladiatorial schools of ancient Rome, known as ludi, were institutions designed to transform human beings into instruments of entertainment and death. Gladiators were slaves whose sole purpose was to fight and die for the amusement of Roman crowds. They were trained in specialized forms of combat, each with its own weapons, armor, and fighting techniques. Spartacus was trained as a myrmillo, a heavily armored fighter who wielded a large shield and short sword called a gladius. Life in a gladiatorial school was one of constant discipline and deprivation. The trainers, many of them former gladiators themselves, employed brutal methods to break the will of their charges and mold them into compliant warriors. The gladiators received better food than most slaves, as their physical condition was essential to their function, and they had access to medical care for their injuries. Yet they lived under the constant shadow of death, knowing that any fight in the arena might be their last. It was to such a school in Capua, a prosperous city approximately 25 miles north of what is now Naples, that Spartacus was sent. The school was owned by a man named Lentulus Batiatus, and it housed some 200 gladiators from various backgrounds. These men came from different nations, spoke different languages, and had been trained in different fighting styles. Yet they shared one thing in common. They were all slaves, and they all faced the same grim fate. Capua's escape and the beginning of the revolt. In the spring of 73 BCE, something remarkable occurred within the walls of Batiatus's gladiatorial school. A conspiracy was born among the enslaved fighters. Over 200 gladiators began plotting their escape, dreaming of freedom beyond the walls that confined them. According to Plutarch, their original plan was simply to flee, to escape from servitude, and make their way to lives beyond Roman control. However, as so often happens with conspiracies involving large numbers of people, the plot was betrayed. Someone informed the authorities, and the gladiators faced the certainty of torture and execution. It was at this moment that Spartacus and his fellow conspirators chose to act rather than submit to their fate. Approximately 70 of them rose up, armed themselves with kitchen implements, choppers and spits from the school's kitchens, and fought their way to freedom. The initial escape was chaotic and desperate. The gladiators overwhelmed their guards and trainers, seizing whatever weapons they could find. Once outside the school, they discovered a wagon transporting gladiatorial equipment and arms. This chance discovery provided them with proper weapons and armor, transforming them from escaped slaves into a genuine fighting force. They fled into the surrounding countryside and made their way to Mount Vesuvius, the dormant volcano that would later destroy the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. On the mountain, the escaped gladiators established their camp and chose their leaders. Spartacus emerged as the primary commander, joined by two Gallic gladiators named Crixus and Oenomaus. From this precarious position, they began raiding the wealthy estates that dotted the Campanian countryside, distributing their plunder equally among their growing number of followers. Word of the escape spread rapidly through the slave population of the region. Campania was home to numerous large agricultural estates worked by thousands of enslaved laborers. For these workers, news of successful resistance against their masters represented an irresistible beacon of hope. Within weeks, the initial band of 70 had swelled to several hundred, then several thousand. Shepherds, field workers, and household slaves abandoned their masters and made their way to Mount Vesuvius to join the rebellion. The first victories against Rome. The Roman Senate initially viewed the events in Campania as nothing more than a criminal disturbance, a problem to be handled by local authorities rather than a genuine military threat. This profound underestimation of Spartacus and his followers would cost Rome dearly.
A praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber was dispatched with approximately 3,000 militiamen to deal with the escaped slaves. These were not regular legionnaires, but hastily assembled troops, gathered, in Appian's words, in haste and at random, for the Romans did not consider this a war yet, but a raid, something like an attack of robbery. Glaber arrived at Mount Vesuvius and implemented what seemed like a straightforward strategy. He positioned his forces to block the only known path leading down from the mountain and settled in to wait.
Without access to supplies and reinforcements, he reasoned, the slaves would eventually be forced to surrender or starve. But Spartacus proved to be a military leader of exceptional ability. Observing that Glaber had neglected to guard a steep cliff face covered in wild grapevines, he ordered his men to weave the vines into ropes and ladders. Under cover of night, the gladiators descended the cliff, circled around the Roman position, and attacked from behind. The results were catastrophic for the Roman force. Caught completely by surprise, the militiamen were routed and slaughtered. Glaber himself was reportedly among the casualties. The escaped slaves captured the Roman camp and seized its weapons, supplies, and military equipment. More importantly, they had demonstrated that they could defeat Roman forces in open combat. Rome dispatched a second expedition under the praetor Publius Varinius. For reasons that remain unclear, Varinius chose to divide his forces among several subordinate commanders, perhaps hoping to encircle the rebels. This decision proved disastrous. Spartacus's forces defeated each Roman detachment in turn. One of Varinius's subordinates, Cosinius, was killed in battle. Varinius himself narrowly escaped capture, losing even his horse and his ceremonial fasces, the symbols of his authority. These victories had profound effects on both the rebellion and the Roman response. For the slaves, each success demonstrated that the seemingly invincible Roman military could be beaten. The rebellion's ranks continued to swell as more enslaved people joined, along with free peasants and herdsmen from the surrounding regions. By the winter of 73 to 72 BCE, Spartacus commanded a force estimated at 70,000 men, women, and children. For Rome, the successive defeats were humiliating and alarming. What had begun as a minor police action had transformed into a genuine military crisis. The Senate could no longer deny that they faced a serious threat to the security of the Italian peninsula itself. The 72 BCE campaign and internal conflicts. As spring arrived in 72 BCE, Spartacus began moving his massive following northward. His apparent goal, according to Plutarch, was to cross the Alps and allow his followers to disperse to their homelands beyond Roman territory. For many of the Gauls and Germans among his ranks, this represented a genuine opportunity to return to their native lands and regain their freedom. The Roman Senate, now fully awakened to the danger, dispatched both consuls for the year 72 BCE, Lucius Gellius Publicola and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus, along with their consular legions. These were not untrained militias, but regular Roman infantry, the finest soldiers in the ancient world. The combined Roman force numbered perhaps 40,000 men. However, the rebel army was no longer a unified force. A split had developed between Spartacus and his co-commander Crixus regarding the direction of the rebellion. This decision proved disastrous. Spartacus's forces defeated each Roman detachment in turn. One of Varinius's subordinates, Cosinius, was killed in battle. Varinius himself narrowly escaped capture, losing even his horse and his ceremonial fasces, the symbols of his authority. While Spartacus wished to lead his followers to freedom beyond Italy, Crixus and a substantial portion of the army, primarily the Gallic contingent, preferred to remain in Italy, continuing to raid and plunder rather than face the uncertain journey across the Alps. This division proved fatal for Crixus. He and approximately 30,000 followers separated from the main body and were engaged by the consul Gellius near Mount Garganus in southern Italy. The battle was a disaster for the rebels. Approximately 2/3 of Crixus's force was killed, including Crixus himself. It was the rebellion's first major defeat.
Spartacus, upon learning of Crixus's death, honored his fallen comrade in a grimly ironic fashion. He organized funeral games in the Roman style, forcing 300 captured Roman prisoners to fight as gladiators at the cremation ceremonies for the fallen rebel leaders. The former slave had become, in the words of the historian Florus, a giver of gladiatorial shows rather than a participant. Meanwhile, Spartacus's forces continued their northward march. The consuls Lentulus and Gellius attempted to block their path, while Gellius, fresh from his victory over Crixus, pursued from behind. The consuls hoped to trap the slave army between their forces. Instead, Spartacus turned and defeated Lentulus's legions, then wheeled about and routed Gellius's pursuing army as well. Both consular armies were forced to retreat in disarray. The path to the Alps lay open. Spartacus's forces continued northward until they reached the region around Mutina, modern-day Modena in northern Italy. There they encountered a force of approximately 10,000 soldiers under Gaius Cassius Longinus, the governor of Cisalpine Gaul. Once again, the slaves proved victorious, destroying Cassius's army and capturing his camp. At this moment, with freedom seemingly within reach, something unexpected occurred. For reasons the ancient sources cannot explain, Spartacus turned his army around and began marching south. Some historians speculate that his followers refused to cross the Alps, preferring the familiar terrain of Italy. Others suggest that Spartacus may have harbored ambitions beyond simple escape. Whatever the reason, the slave army would never again come so close to achieving its apparent goal. Marcus Licinius Crassus assumed the command, O Lord. The successive defeats inflicted upon Roman forces by escaped slaves had created a political crisis in Rome. The consuls had been recalled and relieved of their commands. The Senate now turned to one of the Republic's wealthiest and most ambitious citizens, Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was no stranger to military command. He had served as a lieutenant under the dictator Lucius Cornelius Sulla during the civil wars of the 80s BCE, commanding the right wing of Sulla's army at the decisive Battle of the Colline Gate in 82 BCE. He was also reputed to be the richest man in Rome. Having amassed his fortune through shrewd investments in real estate and fire brigades that he would use to acquire burning properties at bargain prices, the Senate granted Crassus a special command and assigned him 8 full legions, including the 2 that had been defeated under the consuls. This gave him a force of approximately 40,000 to 50,000 trained infantry, plus auxiliary troops. It was the largest Roman army assembled to deal with a single internal threat in living memory. Crassus immediately set about restoring discipline to the demoralized Roman forces. He proved to be a harsh commander, reviving the ancient punishment of decimation, in which 1 in every 10 men of a unit found guilty of cowardice or disobedience was beaten to death by his comrades. According to Appian, Crassus wanted to ensure that his soldiers feared him more than they feared the enemy. The initial engagement between Crassus and Spartacus did not go entirely according to plan. Crassus had sent his lieutenant Mummius with 2 legions to shadow the rebel army, but with strict orders not to engage. Mummius, seeing what he believed to be an opportunity, disobeyed his orders and attacked. The result was another Roman defeat as Spartacus's forces routed the legions. Crassus responded by decimating the units involved in the unauthorized attack, reportedly executing some 500 soldiers to restore discipline. The message was clear: defeat at the hands of the enemy was preferable to disobeying orders. With his legions now properly cowed, Crassus began a systematic campaign to corner and destroy the slave army. He engaged Spartacus's forces in several battles, winning some and fighting others to a draw. Slowly but surely, he drove the rebels southward through the region of Lucania toward the toe of the Italian peninsula. The siege of Reggio and the treachery of the pirates. By the autumn of 71 BCE, Spartacus found himself in a desperate situation. Crassus had driven the rebel army to the very tip of Italy, the region around Rhegium, modern-day Reggio Calabria. To the north lay Crassus's legions, to the south lay the Strait of Messina, the narrow body of water separating Italy from the island of Sicily. Spartacus conceived a bold plan.
he would negotiate with Cilician pirates to transport his army across the strait to Sicily, where he would spark a new slave rebellion. Sicily had been the scene of two previous massive slave revolts, the First and Second Servile Wars, and Spartacus no doubt hoped to find a sympathetic population ready to join his cause. According to Plutarch, Crassus reached an agreement with the pirates who accepted payment to provide transport ships. But the pirates proved treacherous. They took Spartacus's gold and sailed away without fulfilling their bargain. The slave army was stranded on the Italian mainland with its back to the sea. Crassus moved quickly to exploit this opportunity.
He ordered his legions to construct an enormous fortification across the narrowest part of the peninsula, effectively trapping the rebels behind a wall stretching approximately 55 kilometers from sea to sea. The fortification included a deep ditch and earthwork ramparts, creating an obstacle that the lightly equipped slave army could not easily overcome. Spartacus and his followers found themselves under siege. Cut off from supplies and reinforcements, facing the prospect of starvation, they attempted to break through the Roman lines. According to Florus, some of the rebels tried to construct rafts from logs and barrels, hoping to escape across the strait, but these efforts proved unsuccessful. Spartacus turned to guerrilla tactics, launching raids against the Roman siege lines and crucifying a Roman prisoner in full view of both armies to demonstrate to his followers the fate that awaited them if they surrendered. As winter set in, the situation grew increasingly desperate. The rebel army was trapped, slowly starving, while Crassus's legions waited patiently for their quarry to weaken. The arrival of Pompey and the final despair. As the siege dragged on, political developments in Rome threatened to deprive Crassus of his victory. The famous general Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known to history as Pompey the Great, was returning to Italy with his legions after suppressing a rebellion in Hispania. The Senate, perhaps doubting Crassus's ability to finish the job, ordered Pompey to bypass Rome and march south to assist in ending the slave revolt. This was precisely what Crassus had feared. If Pompey arrived before the rebellion was crushed, the younger and more popular general would claim credit for the victory. Crassus intensified his efforts to destroy Spartacus before his rival could arrive. For Spartacus, the news of Pompey's approach was equally significant. The arrival of additional Roman legions would make escape impossible. In a desperate gamble, he sent envoys to Crassus, offering to negotiate terms for ending the conflict. Crassus refused any negotiations. For the Roman commander, the only acceptable outcome was the complete destruction of the rebel army. Facing certain death if they remained trapped, Spartacus rallied his followers for one final attempt to break through the Roman lines. During a stormy night, the rebels filled a portion of the Roman ditch with earth, tree branches, and the bodies of slaughtered prisoners, creating a causeway over which the army could cross. Approximately 1/3 of the rebel force managed to escape before Roman forces could respond. Crassus pursued the escaped rebels with his legions. In a series of running battles, sections of the slave army were caught and destroyed. Two of Spartacus's subordinate commanders, Gannicus and Castus, were killed along with their followers in these engagements. The final battle and the death of Spartacus. In the spring of 71 BCE, the final confrontation between Spartacus and Crassus took place somewhere in the region of Lucania in southern Italy. The precise location of the battle is unknown, though some ancient sources suggest it occurred near the headwaters of the Salaris River. Spartacus knew this would be his final battle. According to Plutarch, when his horse was brought to him before the engagement, he drew his sword and killed the animal, declaring that if he won, he would have plenty of fine horses from the enemy, and if he lost, he would have no need for one. The battle that followed was ferocious. Spartacus fought at the front of his forces, leading by example as he had throughout the rebellion. According to the ancient accounts, he attempted to cut his way directly through to Crassus himself, hoping that killing the Roman commander might turn the tide of battle.
Plutarch provides a vivid description of Spartacus's final moments. He writes that Spartacus made straight for Crassus himself, charging forward through the press of weapons and wounded men, and though he did not reach Crassus, he cut down 2 centurions who fell on him together. Finally, when his own men had taken to flight, he himself, surrounded by enemies, stood his ground and died fighting to the last. Appian offers a similar account, noting that Spartacus was wounded by a spear thrust to the thigh, but continued fighting from his knees until he was finally overwhelmed. His body was never positively identified among the masses of the slain. The defeat of Spartacus's army was total. Crassus took approximately 6,000 prisoners from the battlefield. As a gruesome warning against future rebellions, he ordered all of them crucified along the Appian Way, the great road connecting Capua to Rome. For miles, the crosses bearing the bodies of the crucified rebels lined the roadside, a grim reminder of the fate awaiting those who dared challenge Roman power. The political consequences and the First Triumvirate. The aftermath of the Third Servile War had profound implications for Roman politics. Pompey, arriving with his legions just as the final battles were being fought, intercepted and destroyed approximately 5,000 rebels who had escaped northward from the final battle. In his dispatch to the Senate, he claimed that while Crassus had defeated the slaves in open battle, he himself had dug the war up by the roots. This claim infuriated Crassus, who felt robbed of the full credit for his victory. The political rivalry between the 2 generals would shape Roman politics for decades to come. Both men were granted triumphs for their victories, though Crassus's celebration was the lesser honor of an ovation, while Pompey received a full triumph for his successes in Spain. The competition between Crassus and Pompey led directly to their joint consulship in 70 BCE. Both men stationed their legions outside Rome, and neither was willing to dismiss his troops while the other remained armed. Eventually, they reached a compromise that allowed them to serve as consuls together, using their offices to dismantle much of Sulla's constitutional reforms and expand their own political influence. This uneasy alliance between Crassus and Pompey would later expand to include an ambitious young politician named Gaius Julius Caesar. Together, the 3 men formed what historians call the First Triumvirate, an informal political alliance that effectively controlled Roman politics from 60 BCE until it collapsed amid civil war following Crassus's death at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE. In a very real sense, the political careers of both Crassus and Pompey, and through them the transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire, can be traced back to the War of Spartacus. The military commands and political influence they gained from defeating the rebellion provided the foundation for their subsequent dominance of Roman political life. The impact on Roman slavery. It is important to note what the War of Spartacus did not accomplish. The rebellion did not end slavery in the Roman world. It did not lead to significant reforms in the treatment of enslaved people. It did not establish any lasting territory or community of freed slaves. In purely practical terms, the revolt failed completely in achieving any permanent change to the institution of slavery. However, the psychological impact on Roman society was profound and lasting. For generations after Spartacus, Roman slave owners lived in fear of another uprising. The Third Servile War demonstrated that slaves could organize, fight effectively, and repeatedly defeat Roman military forces. The seemingly docile population upon which Roman prosperity depended had shown itself capable of catastrophic violence. This fear influenced Roman policy in various ways. There is evidence that some slave owners improved conditions for their slaves, motivated not by humanitarian concerns, but by the fear that mistreatment might provoke rebellion.
The construction of the massive gladiatorial schools was modified to incorporate better security measures. Restrictions were placed on the concentration of large numbers of slaves in any single location. Yet slavery remained central to the Roman economy throughout the Republican and imperial period. It would not be until the economic transformations of late antiquity, centuries after Spartacus, that slavery gradually gave way to other forms of bound labor, such as serfdom. The historical and cultural legacy of Spartacus. Although Spartacus failed in his immediate objectives, his legacy has endured for more than 2,000 years. Even the Roman historians who chronicled his rebellion could not help but express grudging admiration for his abilities and character. Plutarch described him as possessing intelligence and culture superior to his condition,
while Appian noted his fairness in distributing plunder equally among his followers. In the 18th century CE, Spartacus was rediscovered by European intellectuals seeking historical models for resistance against tyranny. The French playwright Bernard Joseph Saurin wrote a tragedy entitled Spartacus in 1760, drawing parallels between Roman oppression and the conditions of his own time. Following the French Revolution, the play was revived, and Spartacus became a symbol of revolutionary struggle against unjust authority. The 19th century saw Spartacus embraced by socialist and communist thinkers. Karl Marx famously declared Spartacus his hero, calling him the finest fellow antiquity had to offer, and a real representative of the ancient proletariat. Marx saw in Spartacus a precursor to the class struggle he believed would transform modern society. In the early 20th century, German revolutionary socialists Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht named their organization the Spartacus League, later the Spartacist League, in honor of the ancient rebel. The short-lived Spartacist uprising of 1919 in Berlin drew its inspiration explicitly from the memory of the gladiator who had defied Rome. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen Spartacus portrayed in numerous novels, films, and television series. Howard Fast's 1951 novel Spartacus presented him as a freedom fighter, a portrayal that was adapted into Stanley Kubrick's famous 1960 film starring Kirk Douglas. The film's memorable scene in which the captured rebels each claimed to be Spartacus to protect their leader became an iconic moment in cinema history. More recently, the television series Spartacus, which aired from 2010 to 2013, introduced the story to new audiences while taking considerable liberties with the historical record. These popular portrayals have ensured that Spartacus remains one of the most widely recognized figures from the ancient world. Reflections for the contemporary world. What lessons does the War of Spartacus hold for our contemporary world? The rebellion occurred more than 2,000 years ago in a society vastly different from our own, yet certain themes resonate across the centuries. The Third Servile War demonstrates the capacity of oppressed peoples to resist even the most powerful systems of domination. Despite facing the mightiest military machine of the ancient world, a band of escaped slaves managed to defeat Roman armies repeatedly over nearly 2 years. Their resistance proves that courage and determination can, at least temporarily, overcome even overwhelming odds. The rebellion also illustrates the fragility of systems built upon exploitation. The Roman economy depended upon slave labor, yet that dependence created a fundamental vulnerability. When the enslaved population rose in revolt, they threatened not merely their individual masters, but the entire economic and social structure of the Roman world. For modern societies, this suggests the importance of examining the foundations upon which prosperity is built. Are there populations whose exploitation sustain our way of life? Are there injustices embedded in our economic systems that might provoke future conflicts? The War of Spartacus reminds us that stability built upon oppression is always precarious. Furthermore, the legacy of Spartacus speaks to the enduring human desire for freedom and dignity. The gladiators who escaped from Capua were not fighting for abstract principles or ideological programs. They were fighting for their lives, for their freedom, for the simple right to determine their own fate. This fundamental human aspiration transcends any particular historical period or cultural context. In our contemporary world, where various forms of exploitation and forced labor persist despite their legal prohibition, the figure of Spartacus continues to inspire those who struggle against injustice. From labor movements to civil rights campaigns to anti-trafficking organizations, the memory of the gladiator who defied Rome reminds us that resistance against oppression is possible, and that individual courage can spark movements that shake the foundations of power. The eternal symbol of resistance. The War of Spartacus ended in defeat on a battlefield in southern Italy in the spring of 71 BCE. Its leader died fighting, his body lost among thousands of the slain. 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, their corpses left to rot as a warning to others who might contemplate rebellion. Yet, in a deeper sense, Spartacus achieved a victory that his Roman opponents could never have imagined. His name has survived across more than 2 millennia, not as a warning against rebellion, but as an inspiration for those who resist oppression. The ancient historians who chronicled the Third Servile War could not explain why Spartacus turned back from the Alps when freedom lay within reach. They could not understand why he chose to continue fighting in Italy rather than escape to safety. Perhaps the answer is that freedom meant something more to Spartacus than mere escape from Roman territory. Perhaps he understood that true freedom required confronting the power that had enslaved him.
Even if that confrontation could only end in death. Whatever his motivations, Spartacus left behind a legacy that continues to inspire. From the revolutionaries of the 18th century to the civil rights activists of the 20th, from novelists and filmmakers to ordinary people confronting injustice in their daily lives, the gladiator from Thrace remains a powerful symbol of resistance against tyranny. His story reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, the human spirit can find the courage to resist. It reminds us that those who seem powerless can challenge even the mightiest empires. And it reminds us that while rebellions may fail in their immediate objectives, the ideals for which people fight can survive across centuries to inspire future generations. In this sense, the War of Spartacus never truly ended. It continues in every struggle for human dignity, in every movement against exploitation, in every act of resistance against oppression. The gladiator who led 70 slaves to freedom from a training school in Capua became a symbol that will endure as long as humanity values freedom. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most remarkable episodes. The story of Spartacus and the Third Servile War offers profound lessons about human courage, the nature of oppression, and the enduring struggle for freedom and dignity. If you found this content valuable for your understanding of ancient history and its relevance to our world today, please consider subscribing to our channel to continue your historical education. Share this video with fellow students, educators, and anyone interested in the lessons of the past. By supporting this channel, you help us create more in-depth historical content that serves educational and academic purposes. Together, we can explore the events, figures, and movements that have shaped human civilization.
In our upcoming content, we will continue to examine the great moments of history with the same depth, rigor, and commitment to accuracy that you have experienced today. Activate your notification bell to ensure you never miss our future explorations of the past. Until next time, may we all draw inspiration from those who, like Spartacus, had the courage to stand against injustice, regardless of the odds.